Well, ladies and gentlemen, a big day for Morning Shot because this is video 1000. Now, at the time of recording, the actual view count, or the video count, should we call it, was 999 videos. Can you believe it? 1,000 videos of talking smack about the government. And I got to remind you why I actually do what I do. And the reason I do what I do is to normalize, well, talking smack about the government. Many individuals feel the type of things that I feel. I'm sure you do too. And to be honest, many of them think it's just them. Somehow the rest of us don't feel the same. And it's important for me to tell you what's going on in the way that I do so that you can tell your friends exactly the same thing. Knowledge is power after all, and the more people that become interested in politics, the more they make better voting decisions. So that's the idea, at least. Anyway, let's get on to the video of today. Yes, video 1000. And if you really want to support me, subscribe to the channel. Come on, guys, help me grow the channel to 200,000 subscribers. Share this with your friends if they haven't already been exposed to the joy that is Morning Shot. We expose them. It will be great. So let's actually get on to some news. Well, let's start off with the whole United States G20 palaver. Because as you know, the United States under Donald Trump announced that it's not going to invite South Africa to any G20 meetings during its presidency. And you'll know that there's a reason for that. And that's because Washington accuses South Africa of racial discrimination via BEE and labor quotas, factual, and politics of grievance, also factual, and undermining economic growth, investment, and global consensus, all factual. BEE has been the #1 destructor of the economy. Anyway, he wants Poland to replace South Africa in the forum, which is unprecedented in terms of its diplomatic moves. Now, the reason for this is because Poland actually has a growing economy. And he's like, well, this would be great. Let's talk to a country that's actually growing. Poland's that country. Well, Ramaphosa has dismissed the snub as a commercial break. I don't know what a commercial break means. And he says that it's basically going to be South Africa's little break, a 1-year sabbatical, if you will, until the UK chairs the next committee of the G20. And at that point, they will re-engage. Now, he claims that other G20 members have privately said that they will side with South Africa and see the US's move to exclude South Africa as a form of overreach. But I can guarantee you, none of them are boycotting the G20. Now, the government insists that it will not lobby for re-entry, and it's, and I quote, not bothered. Well, pretty childish response. Well, anyway, Ronald Lamola, the minister of the Islamist DIRCO, published 2 strong letters, and he says it's not usually his habit of responding to the type of things the US says, but he feels in this instance that he needs to. Now, he says South Africa will not accept double standards from Washington, and he claims that the US has no unilateral authority to exclude South Africa from a consensus-based forum. He further went on to defend BEE and redress policies as constitutional objectives and not as being anti-white discrimination. And he accused the US of misunderstanding South Africa's GNU and its reconciliation mission. Well, I must be honest, Ronald, that includes probably my entire audience. We also misunderstand your reconciliation message because the majority of us also see it as racial discrimination. Well, that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments. But this idea of double standards is, for me personally, double standards. Now, the reason for that is because South Africa demands to be treated as a sovereign state with its own policies and says that the US shouldn't be allowed to influence them. South Africa maintains that as a diplomatic sovereign state of its own right, it can choose its own enemies, it can fight its own battles, and it can have its own foreign policy as it so wishes. But it's my recollection that South Africa doesn't apply the same standard to that famous country in the Middle East called Israel, where they want to tell Israel what they should do with their own borders. In fact, if you recall, Ramaphosa at the UN maintained that Israel should go back to the 1960s borders and what. So Israel has the right to say, we're a sovereign state with our own diplomatic orders, blah, blah, blah. And so what you actually find is that, to be honest, the government just talks out as behind. It's one rule for me, another rule for thee, or typical communist way. Now, Lamola reiterated that South Africa will not amend or dilute BEE to satisfy foreign pressure. Well, I mean, you could just do it to, I don't know, grow the economy and not be a twat, but that's just my opinion. Now, the government frames BEE as a fulfillment of promises made at the end of apartheid and the key to dismantling structural inequality. Well, that's all good and fine. But what BEE has done is impoverished more people than it's uplifted. I mean, the only individuals it's uplifted are ANC card-carrying member cadres. And the stats all show us that. Now, critics argue that the BEE, as you know, only enriches connected elites and entrenches corruption and pushes investments away. And by critics, we mean like Zondo. During the actual Zondo commissions, he highlighted BEE as the primary method through which state capture occurred. So, yeah, critics, like Zondo, the thing we paid billions for. In any case, the government still maintains that whites hold disproportionate wealth and land, which justifies aggressive redress. Well, that statement alone is discrimination. I mean, I don't understand why these people cannot understand that they're talking out their behinds. Now, onto some actual good news, and that is around the proposed wealth tax, because the finance minister, who's not retarded, rejected calls for a new annual wealth tax because he says South Africa already has multiple wealth-linked taxes, specifically estate duty, donations tax, transfer duty, and so forth. And combined, these raise more than the OECD equivalents. Now, the top earners already carry 60% of personal income tax and are the backbone of state revenue. So Treasury warns, naturally, that a wealth tax would just push high earners to immigrate. Well, we'll think a lot of them are immigrating anyway. But anyway, he says that the costs to the fiscus are far more than the tax itself would raise, and that international examples show that wealth taxes are costly, ineffective, and are often scrapped because they cause capital flight. But you see, when you're an ideologue like the ANC, well, the truth very rarely impacts what you think, because who cares about the truth? It's all about the money. Show me the money. Now, talking of money, there is something really weird that's happened, and that's in relation to the rand, because despite political turmoil, the rand has hit a 3-year high. Now, volatility against the dollar is at a 24-year low. That basically means the rand's worth more money. Now, South Africa's new 12 and 30-year bonds have attracted $13 billion in bids for a $3.5 billion assurance. And this is nearly 4 times oversubscription. So we're basically oversubscribing to our bonds. Why people want these, I don't know. Now, yields are lower than similar bonds issued earlier this year, showing strong global confidence. So like they're actually going to get paid less, but they still want them. Who knew? Now, factors supporting the rally are the expected US interest rate cuts and an S&P outlook upgrade and reduced African risk premium. So what we still have is we have domestic indicators which remain weak. The PMI contraction, low growth, and the rising fuel prices means that domestically we all feel the pressure. But internationally, people actually want to buy our bonds. I have no idea why. But in any case, this is good news for the average consumer, because if the cost of the dollar goes down, that means many of the goods that we import that are linked to the dollar, such as oil, well, that reduces. And so we should see that being a cost of living decrease for the average South African. But we'll see if the ANC and finance actually passes on to the savings to the consumer. Now, talking of ANC mishaps, let's consider the whole debacle around Cyril Ramaphosa and his term. Because as you'll know, if you watch this channel, there was a suggestion that the ANC was attempting to push out or remove Cyril Ramaphosa, and there was suggestions that maybe he would leave his term early after the G20. Well, the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, has publicly stated that Ramaphosa will serve his full term. And I must be honest and say, when I read his speech, I did think to myself, like, he's chained Ramaphosa's foot to a desk, and Ramaphosa's sitting there doing, you know, that universal thing we see on YouTube now, that, like, the help, like, I need help, and he can't leave. Now, internal rumors are that there is a push to remove Ramaphosa, but many individuals are dismissing it as factional noise. I mean, this is the one thing that we've become very used to in the ANC. Whenever there's any form of kerfuffle, it's always factions, right? Remember the RET faction that nobody remembers because it wasn't a real thing? Ramaphosa's being the most RET president we've ever had in terms of his policies. Well, the ANC Secretary General and all the leagues, that's the Women's League, the Youth League, and the Veterans League, have all now put out statements backing Ramaphosa. And disgruntled former ministers, now demoted, are believed to be behind the destabilization whispers. So these individuals have got fired, probably made way for the GNU, and they are suggesting that these are the individuals trying to get Ramaphosa sacked. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but I mean, it's a nice story. The GNU still attempts to project unity and stability amidst international pressure and diplomatic criticism, because we are all now criticizing the GNU and the objectives or what it's actually done for the Republic. And with the international pressure from the US, any form of fractures in the GNU will see a downward spiral in the Republic. Do let me know what you think of that in the comments section below. Now, in terms of the actual ANC, let's move on to our last news story. And this is really the news story around Johannesburg, because the ANC has issued an internal report in Joburg saying that the ANC itself, in the epicenter of the country, could further decline in 2026. Now, the ANC in that sense is already like 30%, 40%. So it declining will be catastrophic. Remember, that's the epicenter of the country. That's the economic heartlands. Now, the core reasons that the ANC itself identifies for this is complete service delivery breakdown. That's electricity, water, waste, and housing. And considering that Joburg frequently has no water and frequently has electricity outages, well, yes, this should be obvious to anybody with a brain cell. Another reason is coalition chaos, because you will recall that we had two Algermore mayors in Joburg, both of which were like nutty as all hell. And then we had a number of ANC individuals and a number of votes of no confidence in those ANC individuals. And yet, despite this paralysis and voter frustration, nothing changes, because that's the ANC way. Now, the ANC warns that factionalism and unpopular ward candidates are alienating communities. And the reason of this factionalism claim is because we just saw it in the leadership battles. Like every time the ANC declines, it's factionalism, like, whatever, proper communist rubbish. And actually, you saw a very similar playbook adopted during the Russian fall of the USSR. It's always factionalism. Now, the unpopular ward candidates should be obvious, and that is because virtually everybody that the ANC puts forward now has forms of corruption allegations. And this is leading through, as the ANC itself identifies, to perceptions of corruption and moral decay within the party itself, which is turning former supporters into non-voters. And let's be honest, they're not perceptions, they're the reality. Now, the report calls the ANC's decline deep, structural, and multi-dimensional, and not a temporary dip. So the ANC itself can see itself declining. And they say they need to, and I quote, reform. What is Ramaphosa pushing? Reform agendas. It's always a load of twaddle, because every time there's a vote of confidence in the ANC leadership in Joburg, whether it be in Gauteng against Panyaza Lesufi, whether it be against the Joburg mayor or the whatever mayor, the ANC always backs up the same problematic stooges because, unity. And this is the reason that nobody actually trusts the ANC in those regions, because the ANC is toxic. And we all look forward to the day that it dies a miserable death. At least that's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until tomorrow, bye.